Welcome everybody to Cystic Fibrosis Queensland's webinars. We're lucky enough to have Andrew Prowse, a CF ACT member, who's going to present tonight on an overview of Commonwealth financial assistance. And we, in developing the webinar, realised these were very large topics. So we've decided that we'll probably split them up, and this one will cover unemployment assistance, which will also cover people who are doing casual work. So you'll see advertised on our website and through Facebook. Andrew has kindly offered to do some more of these webinars around parents and family, income support, carer support, disability, students. So we're going to try and have those happen between now and the end of the year, and the students one we'll try and run as close to the beginning of the school and uni year as we can. So we figured this was the best way to handle this. So with me here in Brisbane is my manager, Gail White, who's our Community Support Service Manager.
Hi everyone.
And Andrew's there in Canberra, and he's going to take us through the presentation tonight. So you will see on your screen that you have a little chat screen. If you want to ask a question, you can send those questions through and I'll see them, and every few slides or so we'll stop and have a bit of a catch up with the questions. Or if you want to just put your hand up and you want to ask a question, if you've got a microphone on your end of the system, if you're sitting at a computer that's got a microphone, I'll turn your microphone on and see if we can talk directly to you. Let's have a go at doing that. But over to you, Andrew. Let's get started, and away we go.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Gail. And yeah, it's good. I'm excited to be able to present this information tonight and give some knowledge that I have to people in the CF community. And so just a quick background on myself. I live in Canberra, and I live with cystic fibrosis. I'm in my mid-20s, and I have a background in social security. So I thought this is a provide an opportunity to share some of that information that I have come across in my time. So, alrighty, well, let's get underway. So when we're talking about Commonwealth assistance, as Mark said, there are quite a number of areas of income support that could be discussed tonight. But given that the social security system and inside that the income support system is a bit of an unwieldy behemoth, and the time restrictions with the webinar, we've decided just to focus on Commonwealth assistance for people that are unemployed or casually employed. So we'll be looking at the relevant income support payments, primarily New Start Allowance and Youth Allowance Job Seeker. We won't go into other minor payments like Partner Allowance or Widow Allowance, and the supplementary payments that people may be eligible for when receiving those primary income support payments. We'll also look at Commonwealth concession cards, which is quite a big issue in the CF community. How can I access a concession card? How can I get one? So we'll touch over ways to access that and apply, and I'll just take a quick look at the National Disability Insurance Scheme. Mark has informed me that there isn't as much information about it up in Queensland, probably in part because there aren't any trial sites in Queensland. So yeah, we'll provide a bit of an overview on disability, NDIS, Disability Care Australia, and how it affects your income support. Okay, so this is a bit of this diagram shows a broad architecture of the income support system, and we can see that there's very distinct categories, and that's deliberately done because the way that the income support system is structured in Australia is that it's based on categorical income support. So what sort of category do you fit into, which generally reflect those categories of society where people are thought to be and or are most in need of assistance, so people that are unemployed or people that are carers and so on and so on. And there's just a little box down the bottom of that slide. In some of the slides I have put additional notes in there, so we won't be able to view the notes, we won't be viewing the notes during the slides, during the webinar tonight, but once it's posted on there you can go back and have a look at those notes. Okay, so we'll look into the unemployment payments, and first New Start allowance, which I'm sure a lot of you would be familiar with. So it's a workforce age payment, so you've got to be between 22 and 64, and you have to be engaged in a specific activity to meet your activity test. Unless you have some sort of exemption, you may be temporarily incapacitated to work, whatever. Importantly, if you're on New Start allowance, you're automatically issued with a healthcare card. It doesn't matter about any other circumstances. If you're eligible and receiving New Start allowance, you will get a healthcare card. If you are a single principal carer of a dependent child is someone under 16 where you've got at least 14% of the care, or if you have a partial capacity to work, which is assessed as 15 to 29 hours per week, then you would be eligible to receive a pensioner concession card while you're on New Start allowance. And there's also, with the household assistance package that came in during 2012, there's an automatic payment of the Clean Energy Supplement, which is designed to offset the increased costs associated with the higher energy prices from that Clean Energy package. There are a number of supplementary payments that may be payable to you, but this depends on your specific circumstances. You can see there's pharmaceutical allowance, and that at the moment is about $6.20, so that covers the cost of a concessional script, one concessional script a fortnight, and other things like rent assistance, income support bonus, EDAP, and telephone allowance. So I've put links there so you can go away and have a look and get a bit of an idea about what those payments are about. And broadly, more information on New Start allowance, I've put a link right down the bottom there, which will take you to the Department of Human Services website. And as Mark said, during the course of the webinar tonight, if you do have any questions, send them in, and Mark will be looking at those questions and filtering them along to me. So, yeah.
We press on?
Yes, yes. Okay, so youth allowance job seeker. A lot of people would, again, already know about youth allowance. There are 3 different categories of the youth allowance payment. There is if you're a job seeker, which we'll be looking at tonight. There are people that may be students, and they would receive a youth allowance student payment, and there's apprentices, and that they have their own category as well. So unlike New Start allowance, this payment is actually only indexed once a year on 1 January, but it does use the same method of indexation, which is the consumer price inflation. Again, you have to be meeting your activity test unless you're exempt, and I believe in youth allowance job seeker case it's only if you're temporarily incapacitated. And if you're someone that doesn't have a Year 12 or equivalent qualification, there's these new earn or learn sort of mutual obligations things where you have to be either earning in paid work, or you have to be undertaking education or training in order to receive the youth allowance. If you're someone that is on youth allowance job seeker and you're not deemed to be someone living independently of your parents, then you'd have a parental income test applied, and you can see there for some people you'd have a family actual means test applied. Again, if you're on youth allowance job seeker, you'd automatically get a healthcare card, and pensioner concession cards would be issued under the same criteria as Newstart. Now, in terms of the supplementary payments, it's pretty much the same. The one I wanted to quickly focus on was the Youth Disability Supplement. You can see that there's a link to that on the Department of Human Services website, and if you can just bear with me a sec. So this is paid to people on youth allowance job seeker who are assessed as having a partial capacity to work, so that 15 to 29 hour band with your assessed as being able to work. And the youth disability supplement is paid up to a certain amount so that it can't exceed the rate of Newstart, which would be paid if you were on Newstart. So it's not necessarily a fixed rate, but it's paid up to a certain amount. And I'm not sure if many people are aware of that, but it's something I believe you have to apply for separately to your youth allowance job seeker claim. So that's something to keep in mind. Mark, if we'll go on to the next one. Alrighty. We've just got a hypothetical case study that we'll work through that will, I guess, give you a bit of a feel for what supplementary payments are specifically available, how to claim, and those sorts of things relating to someone who is unemployed or maybe in casual work. So Ryan, he's from Roma, and he's living with CF and other circumstances. He's single, he doesn't have dependent children, he pays around $250 a fortnight for rent in a share house. And look, his, like a lot of people with CF, his health situation is episodic, and at his best he can work up to about 25 hours a week, but because he's a casual shift worker, he only gets paid when he comes into work, and there's a lot of financial pressure on Ryan. He's not sure if he can meet his medical and rental costs going forward, and he hasn't had interaction with Centrelink, Department of Human Services before, so he just wants to find out what's available for someone in his situation, how to apply for it. So it's a bit of a common misconception that if you're on Newstart allowance, you can't be working. That's not true. In the legislation, there is discretion to treat someone as unemployed for NSA, even though that they may be working, but that work can't be, I guess, permanent in nature. It tends to have to be more casual or non-permanent. So the nature of the work is the important issue there. And as I'm sure a lot of us have experienced, you know, you've got something important at somewhere to be. Ryan has a coughing fit, and he was planning to go to his local Centrelink office in Roma to claim NSA, but he wasn't up to it that day. So he stayed in his room, jumped on his laptop and went online to claim, and the link there for the Department of Human Services website for New Start Allowance, that will take you directly to all the criteria around eligibility, claiming, how to claim, the claim process, managing your payment, that sort of thing. So that's all there.
Do you want to go on, move on to the next one?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Right.
So, in registering his claim, and this is the same for other, broadly the same for other payments, that you need, he needs documentation to complete the claim. So whether that's filling out just the claim form, you know, recent work, payslips from work, that sort of thing. So what he did was he engaged in an intent to claim. So so long as he provides all the supporting documentation to Centrelink within 14 days of that intent to claim, his claim will be processed. He won't have to go through the whole process of starting another claim. As I mentioned before, Ryan, he hadn't had any interaction with Centrelink before, so he'd actually need to go in person at some point and present the proof of identity documentation in person, rather than being able to claim, do his whole claim online. So it turns out his claim was approved, which is good news, and on being qualified for New Start Allowance, he was, based on his personal circumstances, he was eligible for the following payment and the amounts. So these rates that I've got here are based on 1 July 2013 payment rate. So he, depending on his earnings, he could be receiving a payment of up to $497 a fortnight. He'd be automatically receiving a clean energy supplement of $8.40 a fortnight, depending on the amount of rent he was paying, and he could receive up to $82 a fortnight. And with the income support bonus, he could receive that twice a year. But there's a little sort of trick with this, that you can be receiving your base payment, in this case New Start Allowance, for say 4 months, from October through to January, February. But what happens is that to receive the income support bonus, you must meet the criteria for the payment. You must be receiving the payment on what's called the test dates. And there's 2 test dates. One's the 20th of March and the 20th of September. So if you, say, were receiving New Start Allowance on the 19th of March in any given year, but then, sorry, on the 18th of March, and then on the 19th of March you became ineligible for payment for whatever reason, then on the 20th of March you would not receive that income support bonus. And as discussed before, he'd be automatically be getting his healthcare card.
Should we go to the next slide, Andrew?
Yes, thank you. So anyone that applies for New Start Allowance has to undertake a job capacity assessment, and saw that Ryan was having issues with his CF, managing that. His health was fluctuating. So he was assessed as someone having a partial capacity to work, and as I said before, that a partial capacity to work means you have an assessed capacity of 15 to 29 hours a week, and as a result of him having a partial capacity to work, it recognises that he may need additional assistance because he can't fully participate in the workforce. So he, under New Start Allowance, he would also receive the pharmaceutical allowance, every fortnight, and he would also receive the pensioner concession card. So you can only receive either the pension concession card or the healthcare card. You can't have both. And as the pensioner concession card is of greater worth, then that would override the healthcare card that he already has. And there's a new payment that came in as part of the household assistance package for the carbon pricing that I was mentioning before, and this is the essential medical equipment payment. This is provided to people who are in receipt of a Commonwealth concession card, so they may not be in receipt of an income support payment, but they're on a Commonwealth concession card, so it could be a healthcare card, it could be a pension concession card. And so long as you've got that concession card and you have medical needs where you have to use certain essential medical equipment that generates energy, so for instance a nebulizer which requires electricity, you should test your eligibility for this payment. It's a one-off payment of $143 per annum, and the link to the Centrelink page is just there below. And because Ryan also has, because of his health issues, he's on New Start allowance, he has a partial capacity to work, he could also test his eligibility for mobility allowance, and there's two rates for mobility allowance. There's a standard rate, which is for people not on income support, that require substantial assistance to use public transport regardless or not of whether they actually use it or have access to it, and the higher rate is for people who are in receipt of certain income support payments. I won't go into the detail of mobility allowance now. That would be for another seminar, probably disability payments, but if you want more information in the meantime, jump on the link there.
Great. Can I go to the next one?
Yep.
Great.
Yep. Okay. Now
I'm just sort of, maybe we pause there just for a sec, Andrew, and just ask our audience if they've got any questions. You can key them in, but you've got a facility just to raise your hands there. I'm just sort of wondering if I notice people are watching and like there's a little attention meter thing. Is this data that Andrew is covering, is this useful to you all at the moment? If you put your hands up, I can see if this is on target for you, just as a bit of a test. Okay, so quite a few hands going up, Andrew. You're right on target for a few people.
Okay, I'm not sending people to sleep. That's good.
No, not yet. But it is, it's a technical topic and it's got a lot of detail in it. But I think what's good is people can come back to the slides and those links are active. So when they download the slides, they can just click on them and go to those screens. So there's quite a bit more there that people can come back to. But let's press on with Ryan and let's talk about his waiting periods.
Alrighty, so as Ryan's on New Start, he would have to serve the ordinary waiting period of 7 days before his income support payment would be paid, and it would be backdated from the date of claim, so you wouldn't miss out on 7 days of payment. And this ordinary waiting period applies to all income support payments. And there are other waiting periods that I've mentioned there, the income maintenance period and seasonal worker preclusion period. They're not relevant in Ryan's case. I won't go into those today. Another important waiting period he has to, Ryan should know about when he's applying is the liquid assets waiting period. Now, for someone who is single, if you hold more than $5,000 in liquid assets, so something that can be dispensed with easily, so you can see the examples there, you would be subject to that liquid assets waiting period. And the length of your waiting period depends on how much you're over that threshold. So for every $550 that Ryan is above that threshold, his waiting period increases by 1 week up to a maximum of 13 weeks. So if you had liquid assets that would mean your waiting period in theory would be over 13 weeks. It doesn't matter. The maximum waiting period is 13 weeks. And what they do is they actually, for those $550 blocks, what they do is they what's called round down. So if you were, say, had liquid assets of $5,549, then what they would do is they would round that down and assume that you have $5,000. So you wouldn't have a waiting period, but if you had $1 more at $550, you would have that 1 week waiting period. I hope I explained that clearly. It is a little bit tricky, but if you have any questions on that, just send them through.
So the principle generally is if you've got liquid assets, Centrelink wants you to cash them in and use them. But if you don't have any money, then things can be a lot faster. And I imagine if people are destitute, they can also not have to wait a fortnight. Andrew, is that right? Like if Ryan doesn't have any dough at all when he walks into Centrelink, can they potentially give him money fairly quickly?
Yes, so there are advances for hardship, and there are hardship payments. So for instance, if someone was homeless or they were escaping a domestic violence situation and needed financial support, then they could go into Centrelink and get an immediate payment. But, generally, for the general population that didn't have any exceptional circumstances, they may be subject to this liquid assets waiting period. The idea is that it's just another targeting measure. So the Commonwealth says, well, if you have the means to support yourself, then you should do so until such time as you don't. And there's a lot of contention. Well, why should people be forced into a worse financial position and have to sell off things before they can access it? Yes, it is. Like I said, it's quite contentious. It's not for me to say yes or no. It's just how it is, and
that's how the policy is, and that's how the legislation.
Something you should be aware of. That's right. So if you're a member of a couple and you've got dependent children, that liquid asset amount is $10,000. I'm just explaining Ryan's specific situation. So go to the link and you can find more information out about that. So as I said. Going to the next point, as I said before, if you're on New Start allowance, you can still earn income, whether it's through employment or other things like, for instance, earnings off term deposits or something like that. So other unearned income streams. And currently, someone like Ryan, who's on New Start allowance, he can earn up to $62 a fortnight before their payment begins to reduce or withdraw. So for every additional dollar over between $62 and $250, his New Start allowance will withdraw by 50 cents in the dollar, and then beyond $250, his payment will reduce by 60 cents in the dollar until he no longer receives any payment. So just on Ryan's circumstances, because he may be receiving some of those other supplementary payments, he could earn up to about $1,082 per fortnight and still receive some partial rate of payment. So if we go on to the next slide, we can see that if he exceeds that amount that was I mentioned in the previous slide of how much he could earn, he enters what's called an employment nil rate period, because part of his we've assumed that part of his earnings are largely coming from work. So his employment earnings, doesn't matter if all your earnings are from employment, only needs to be a part of it, would put you into this what's called an employment nil rate period. So what's happening is you're still receiving New Start allowance, but at what's called a nil rate. So you remain on the system, you don't get cancelled straight away, and and means you don't have to go through the reclaim process before. And while you're in that employment nil rate period, there are some supplementary payments you can still receive, and Ryan would still be receiving his pension and concession card. And this nil rate period can last up to 6 fortnights, 13 days. And at the end of that nil rate period, if Ryan was, from when the first nil rate period started, that first fortnight started, if he was still earning above that, what's called cut-out point, that 1,082.66, he would lose his entitlement to New Start and have to go through the reclaim process again if he wanted to apply again. With this employment nil rate period, that 6 fortnights and 13 days starts again once in the next fortnight, for instance, if your earnings, in fortnight 1, if your earnings were beyond the cut-out point, you would be on this nil rate period. If you go to your second fortnight and your earnings are below that cut-out point, then you would be back to normal. You'd be on some rate of New Start allowance, and then if you went to fortnight 3, and again your earnings were above that cut-out point for you, then your nil rate period would start all over again. It would be a completely new nil rate period. So it's that 6 fortnights and 13 days is not a cap that's used across the whole of your income support spell duration. It's something that starts again when you reach the cut-out point again. And look, if it turned out that Ryan's his health improved, he had much greater capacity to work, he ended up going from casual to a permanent part-time, and his earnings were beyond that cut-out point, and he knew in the future he'd still be earning too much money, he's able to keep that pension and concession card for 52 weeks from when his payment was cancelled because of his employment earnings. So there are provisions. It's called what's called a period of grace. So you're all of a sudden not left without that additional support you were receiving. It helps encourage you to stay in the workforce and keep earning. All right. I hope that was an adequate explanation for everyone. Yeah, please, if you've got questions, do send them in.
Yeah, up on the chat screen, and I'll put them through to Andrew.
And this is probably a question that gets asked a lot. Ryan's on New Start, but would he be better off going to the DSP and being on DSP? Financially, yes, it's a no-brainer. He's going to be better off. You get a higher rate of payment, more generous indexation, more generous income testing, and softer activity testing. They don't push you into the job provider to hand out, resumes for 20 jobs a week or whatever it is. But regardless or not of the financial benefits of being on one or the other, it really is a matter of whether you're eligible and whether you want to apply for it. So if Ryan was to be eligible for the DSP, he has to have an assessed work capacity of below 15 hours a week.
Can I just ask how they do that? How they do that test, Andrew? How they do the assessed work capacity? Is that a face-to-face discussion?
Yes. Yeah. It's a face-to-face discussion, and they go through. I haven't seen one personally myself, but they do go through criteria based on your work capacity, whether it's related to physical impairments or functional impairments or mental impairments, those sorts of things. And you're assessed against a criteria and comes up with a number, and that will provide your assessed work capacity. That's something I can get more detail on if our webinar listeners tonight want more information on. So in addition to that 15-hour work capacity, Ryan also must have a continuing inability to work, and that means he would have a severe impairment that prevents him from being able to work independently of program support or retrained for work without program support. So that program of support is provided through the job service provider, and if you're not able to, if your assessor's not being able to work independently of those supports within the next 2 years, then you would meet that test. Also, you must score at least 20 points on the what's called impairment tables. The new impairment tables were released at late 2011. This was the first time they'd been updated in 20 years, because what you're seeing on disability support pension is a lot more people with psychological conditions coming on as opposed to physical. That the population has had a bit of a compositional shift. So what they've done is they've just updated the impairment tables to sort of reflect that in more modern day practices, medical practices, that sort of thing. And so those impairment tables, they're based on your ability to function and not your diagnosis. So as I've pointed out there, look, see if it's not a impairment or whatever you want to call it, a disability or a restriction that would enable you to meet the DSP eligibility criteria. It depends on, if you're with someone with CF, it depends on your level of impairment and your ability to work and your work capacity. So those that aren't doing so well, that may have, for instance, just sort of come back up, you know, pre double lung transplant, who you know, struggle to get out of bed every day and have lung capacity of 30% or something, then that would, you know, be in a much better position to meet the DSP eligibility criteria, than someone who, you know, has a very good lung capacity, 80, 90%, 100%, and can run around all day. But that doesn't necessarily mean that someone with a 80 or 90% lung capacity can't be eligible for the DSP. It's just dependent on your condition and your level of impairment.
Okay. Do you want to press on to the next one?
Mm-hmm. So the answer is Ryan, based on what we know about Ryan's circumstances, he wouldn't be eligible for the DSP, but that's based on this point in time. If Ryan's circumstances changed, his health deteriorated quite a bit, he wasn't able to work, or had an extremely restricted work capacity, and then look, it may be worth for him applying for the DSP later on. Just because you may have applied once and you've been rejected doesn't mean that you may meet the eligibility criteria in the future. So that's something to think about. So if a claim for DSP or any other payment is rejected, you can appeal that decision, but I guess it can't be a sort of a spurious appeal. It has to be on a point of payment policy or social security law where an error or an incorrect interpretation has been made. When you put your claim in and they provide you with the outcome of your claim, they will state for what reasons your claim was not successful, and if you're not sure about that or you think that they've made the wrong decision, yes, you can, go and appeal. So the first level of appeals process is with the Centrelink Review Officer, and sometimes they'll uphold the decision, sometimes they'll repeal the decision. And look, if it turns out that you again get a negative decision, then you can take it to the next level and go to the Social Security Appeals Tribunal. Now, the Social Security Appeals Tribunal is made up of members of this tribunal that are selected across the community, so they may be psychologists, lawyers, doctors, whatever relevant sort of professional occupation, and they will then make a decision if you take it to that level. And I haven't included in this, but it is in the link down below. If the SSAT appeal is unsuccessful, you can take it to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. Now, the difference between the Social Security Appeals Tribunal and the Administrative Appeals Tribunal is the Social Security Appeals Tribunal do take a greater understanding and consideration of those grey areas of the Social Security legislation, things that aren't definite but are based on subjective points of view or interpretation, whereas the Administrative Appeals Tribunal bases their decision only on points of law. So if there's been an error in law that has affected your claim, then the AAT can make a decision on that. Otherwise, if it's based on a discretionary type of decision, then the AAT has no power to deal with that. And you can see also, look, if once you get your notification of your claim decision, best to make your appeal within 13 weeks of the notification, because it will affect if your appeal is successful when your payment is backdated to. If we go on to the next one.
Can I just toss a question in here, Andrew? One of our attendees, Hannah, says, is there any sort of sense in what you know if these rates are going to change, if there's a change of government? I guess it's a fairly political question, but I don't know. Have you got any?
Sorry, what do you mean by rates? Are you talking about
I guess it's going back to the payment rates earlier on for Ryan in terms of, New Start allowance. Is there talk that they will change at all with a change of government, or are they things that tend to stay pretty static? And
Hey, Hannah, how you going? As I pointed out before, one of the first slides, Mark, if you wouldn't mind going back to slide 4, I think it is.
which one is that? I haven't got the numbers in front of me.
Oh, that's okay. So the first New Start slide.
This one?
This one here. Yep. So the payments are indexed to the CPI biannually. Now, in terms of an ad hoc increase to New Start allowance, there hasn't been one since 1994, which is getting on 20 years. It's quite a long time. And because there's a lot of issue not only with the rate of payment, but the rate of payment relative to other payments like the disability support pension and general community living standards, because the consumer price inflation, all the consumer price inflation does is look to provide you with a basic recognising the cost of a basic standard of living. So it doesn't actually improve your rate of payment relative to community living standards. What it does is it keeps it constant over time. Whereas something like the disability support pension or the parenting payment SIGL, they are indexed to the greater of the consumer price index and what's called the male total average weekly earnings, or MATAWI. And what tends to happen is that male total average weekly earnings are seen as a benchmark for community living standards, and wages pretty much always tend to rise quicker than consumer inflation. So what's happening is you're getting this really significant divergence between the rate of disability support pension and New Start allowance, because they have different indexation benchmarks, and that's creating a lot of incentive for people to move on to the disability support pension, as well as putting people in New Start in a really difficult situation by not having enough money to be able to support themselves and engage in their activity test requirements. Whether the government's going to do anything about that, look, there's been a lot of you would have seen in the news over the last few years, there's been a very strong campaign with the community organisation groups, even business groups, who are saying that, look, the rate of New Start allowance is too low. And despite all that public support and public pressure, nothing has changed as yet. I'm not sure. I would like to be hopeful that there would be an ad hoc rate increase to New Start and associated payments, but the stumbling block for the government, they're not prepared to commit as much money or resources to increasing the rate of New Start because they feel it would cost a lot of money. And I think there was a Senate inquiry done last year into allowance payments and their adequacy, and in there they provided cost estimates from the relevant department agencies on how much it would cost to increase the rate of New Start, and they're a bit too scared by that and not considering what New Start allowance, what its purpose is it providing enough support for people while they're unemployed or casually employed. So
yeah, it's a big issue, and yeah, look, I think that's sort of covered it really well, Andrew. How about we press on? I think there's still quite a few slides there, and quite a few people are interested in that update towards the end on NDIS. So let's make sure we can hit on that.
All right, sorry about that.
No, you're
a little bit carried away there.
Well, it's a big issue.
Yeah, and I hope
controversial. So, I think that are these rates going to shift is important. So, will we go on to the next one past here?
Yeah. Yes, next one. Yes, here we go. Concession cards. This will be a big point of interest. Just before we start, I'll just say quickly again to Hannah, who asked the question. I'm not sure if you have contacted your local member before, but just keep hassling your local member or write into the relevant minister or department asking what are they going to do about this. The more public pressure there is on the government of the day, regardless who's in power, the more likely that they will stand up and take notice. All right, so concession cards. So this is a question that gets asked a lot. How can I get a concession card for myself living with cystic fibrosis, or how can I get one for my child living with CF, or perhaps my partner or something like that? So there are a few avenues. The first is an automatic entitlement or issue by the income support payments. We can see those listed there. What the X week issue is, so we can see with the first one with New Start and other payments, the 12-week issue. That means that your card, when it's issued, it's valid only for 12 weeks, and so long as you're meeting the criteria to receiving that healthcare card, after that 12 weeks you will receive another one. So it'll just keep rolling and rolling until you are no longer eligible for the healthcare card under that provision. Now, carer's allowance. This is a non-means tested payment for people who are looking after either a dependent child age 16 or under who requires substantially more care, or someone 16 or over where it's what's called a substantial functional impairment. And recently the Department of Families Community Services listed cystic fibrosis as a recognised disability for the purposes of care allowance. So if when you put your application in, you fill the claim form out, you list your disability, or whatever you want to call it, as cystic fibrosis. That will provide a automatic entitlement based on cystic fibrosis. This is pretty much the only area in social security law where a specific impairment or disability allows you to meet the criteria for something. So family tax benefit, you have to be receiving the maximum rate. So if all the mums and dads out there who are receiving family tax benefit Part A, but they're receiving a partial rate, so not the full rate based on how many children they've got in their age, they wouldn't be able to get a healthcare card through that avenue. And you'd also have to be receiving it in fortnightly instalments. Next one, which is probably not as well known. So a lot of kids who have been receiving a healthcare card through care allowance as a dependent child under 16 all of a sudden get to their 16th birthday and boom, they're not eligible for a healthcare card anymore. Well, this is a avenue for those kids and young adults. So if you're a student who is in full-time study and you're aged 16 to 25, you can receive you can apply for an ex-carer healthcare card, but there is a unusual proviso. You have to have been receiving carer allowance healthcare card on the day before your 16th birthday to receive this. So it's an unusual rule, but it's probably just there to provide as a way of implying continuity for that healthcare card. So that's something to be aware of. And you can see there that for carer allowance, it's issued on a 52-week basis, so 1 year. Generally, for people in carer situations and disability support situations, they tend to be more generous with the length of issue, so you don't have to reapply for another payment, another healthcare card for another year, as opposed to guys on New Start allowance where it's 12 weeks. And we'll go on to the next one, Mark.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. Now, if you don't meet the criteria for a healthcare card under any other avenue that we saw in the last slide, you're not on any income support, you're not able to get that ex-care allowance healthcare card for the 16 to 25-year-olds, then what you can look at is what's called the low-income healthcare card, and that pretty much covers anyone that requires the additional assistance that a concessional card would bring for people that have very limited means. So you'd have, if you were saying, if you're an 18-year-old still living with your parents, the only income test that's applied for when you claim is on your personal income, and the link below shows what those income limits are. There would be no parental income test, so it doesn't matter what your parents are earning, it's just based on personal income. And then for reclaiming a low income card after the expiry of your initial card, there's a slightly different personal income test you can see there. And just a reminder, if you are receiving a healthcare card, have you considered applying for that essential medical equipment payment that I discussed earlier in Ryan's case study? Look, you may not be receiving any income support based on how you're getting your healthcare card, but if you're using something like a nebulizer on a daily basis, then investigate it and have a look, because that could well help out with the costs of electricity that would be sucked up by your twice daily or once daily nebulizer routine. We'll go on to the next one.
Can I just ask a question here, Andrew? One from Jasmine. She's saying, does the ex-carers allowance healthcare card happen automatically, or do you need to apply for it once the child turns 16?
That's a separate application. Yes, you have to provide a separate application for that.
Okay.
Okay, so Yeah, pensioner concession card. So again, we can see there's an automatic entitlement if you're receiving certain income support payments. I'll just point again to there are certain types of people on New Start allowance or parenting payment partnered or youth allowance job seeker that can receive that pensioner concession card. So if you're partial capacity to work, or you're a single principal carer of a dependent child, or you're age 60 and over and have been on income support for at least 9 months, and there's also certain DVA customers. And again, if you're on a pensioner concession card, have a think about applying for that EMEP payment if you haven't already.
Press on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So on to the NDIS app, and I think quite a few people are interested. As you say, there's not a lot of information up here, Andrew, about NDIS. So yeah, anything you've got is, I think people are pretty hungry for data.
Okay, the big juicy stuff. So the NDIS, it's a government-funded scheme that aims to sort of improve your quality of life, ability to interact and participate in society, and don't get confused between the NDIS and Disability Care Australia. Disability Care Australia is just the government agency that will be responsible for delivering the NDIS. The NDIS is just the broader scheme under which Disability Care Australia sits. You can see the eligibility criteria underneath that. The important part to point out is if you have a significant permanent disability. Now, there is still, because all this NDIS stuff is still being ironed out, while there is legislation in place, it's still being ironed out, all the specifics and little micro details. Now, a significant permanent disability, my understanding is, for someone living with cystic fibrosis, it would be deemed a permanent disability, even though it is episodic or spasmodic, whatever you want to describe it as, because, you know, for the most part, people would need, people living with CF do need some sort of support, and even if you didn't necessarily need any specific support, because it is permanent, I'm sure that there are other ways in which you can argue that it is significant in your ability to participate in, you know, day-to-day society and whatever. So I suspect one reason why there isn't as much information on the NDIS up in Queensland is because there aren't any trial sites in Queensland. So there have been a few trial sites rolled out from 1 July 2013 already across a few states. So Disability Care Australia is starting in Queensland from July 2016. So it's being progressively rolled out. So there's no detail as yet, but that would mean that it may start with specific cohorts. So say children 0 to 17, or people living in a certain region, say for instance the Capricornica region, as what they've done with the other trial sites across a few of the states where it's been limited to specific cohorts or geographical areas. The exception is the ACT, being a rather small area and population base. From 1 July 2014, the ACT will be the only jurisdiction to have a full jurisdiction-wide rollout. And you can see there that the NDIS is being rolled out from it'll be fully rolled out in July 2019. So that's, what, about 6 years away.
Yeah.
Next, we'll go into the next one unless there's any questions.
If you've got any questions,
okay,
hammer away. Send your questions and I'll put them up to Andrew. Just all you have to do is key them on that little question pad you've got there, or the little discussion pad.
Now, even though Disability Care Australia hasn't reached you up yet in Queensland, there is disability assistance still available. It hasn't disappeared. the Department of Community Child Safety and Disability Services is your state government agency that's responsible for delivering disability assistance. I'm not familiar with the specifics of the services available, but that might be something worthwhile exploring through the link or talking to the support manager up there in CFQ. I'm not sure who the right person to talk to is. Mark could probably.
Well, Gail White's our support manager, and here, unfortunately, she's sitting here with me and sort of saying, "Oh, we haven't had any detail come through on this stuff." So I'm sure it'll come through, and they will certainly be looking for it. So as soon as we get stuff, we'll put it up on our website or on Facebook, so people will see that detail very quickly, and we'll share it as fast as we see it.
Okay. Okay. So under the NDIS, each person that signs up that's eligible receives what's called a funded package of support that fits in with they have like a participation plan, and this funded package of support is designed to help the individual be able to increase their independence and or improve their social and economic participation. That funded package of support is tailored to the individual. It's not a one-size-fits-all, so long as it assists in your ability to improve your day-to-day functioning and participation. So there's more information there on the Disability Care website if you wanted to have a look about funded package of support. But at this stage, you can imagine they're still ironing out the details. It's quite broad. There's just a few examples I put there of what you as an individual may put your funded package of support towards. All right, we'll go on to the next one.
Yep.
Okay. This may or may not have been something that was popping into the minds of your listening tonight. So if you're receiving an income support payment currently, when the NDIS rolls out, reaches you and you've signed up, that any amount that you receive under the NDIS in your funded package of support is not counted as income for your income support payment, so it's not included in your income test, it's not included in your assets tests, and it's not included also in your taxable income. So there's no financial disadvantage to you from receiving this NDIS package for everything except the next point. So from now, 1 July 2013, if you're receiving mobility allowance either at the higher or the standard rate, and you've signed up for a funded package of support under the NDIS, your mobility allowance will be cancelled with immediate effect from when your funded package of support starts. Now, this already participates to people in trial sites, so that's not an issue for people that are residents in Queensland, but it's something to take notice of when the NDIS does reach you. So what's happening is 70% of the value of that mobility allowance is automatically cashed out into your financial support package that you can use to allocate anywhere. It doesn't have to be for transport assistance or anything like that, under which mobility allowance is generally designed for. It can be used for any purpose that in your funded package of support that provides reasonable and necessary supports. Importantly though, people who do receive mobility allowance, they have their funded package of support and their mobility allowance gets cancelled, they are still able to keep their healthcare card. That doesn't change. So you still get to keep your healthcare card. That healthcare card continues until your NDIS participation plan doesn't have those funded, reasonable, necessary supports included. Then, so it's kind of like your still receiving health care card as though you were receiving mobility allowance, but you're not receiving mobility allowance. So it's just sort of what's called grandfathering those that were receiving their healthcare card prior to them signing up to the NDIS. So my suggestion is for those people in Queensland or in one of the trial sites across the country, before you sign up to the NDIS and you're not already in receipt of a healthcare card, test your eligibility for mobility allowance, because it could be your avenue to getting your healthcare card before you start on the NDIS. So it's something to think about. There's more guide policy information on the link below.
Great.
But it's definitely something to keep mind of.
So they just test their eligibility for healthcare cards by going to the Centrelink and making the application. Is that what you mean?
Yes and no. So if mobility allowance was the best avenue for someone to apply for a healthcare card based on their personal circumstances, my advice would be, if they don't already have a healthcare card and they're thinking about applying for mobility allowance, my suggestion is do it before you sign up to an NDIS funded package of support. As I said, in Queensland, the NDIS isn't reaching you until 2016, so it's some way off yet. But for those that are in the trial sites that started on 1 July 2013, this is more of an acute issue for you. And look, if there are people that are listening later tonight or later on, if they have any questions about that while they're living in if they are living in a trial site, send them through, and hopefully I can give you some
Send them
answers.
to me. I can send them on to Andrew, and we can try and get some answers for you, and I'll flick them back to you privately. That's okay. So it's mark@cfq.org.au. That'll get me. Do you want to go to the next slide, Andrew? And we're sort of run over time a bit, but let's.
Yeah, sorry, we have gone a bit over, but we're almost at the end. We are at the end. Okay, so there's resources there that you can click on to find out more about anything you've wanted to know about tonight, or things you're thinking about applying for, you're not sure about all the nitty-gritty detail. The Human Services website is nicely sort of very user-friendly, easily laid out. You can search for the payment, or what sort of category do I fit into? Am I someone that's a carer? Am I a student? So on and so on. The Guide to Australian Government Payments is just a quick reference guide that's updated 4 times a year based on when payment indexation happens. That tells you sort of the current rate of the payments and just the basic conditions of eligibility. So it doesn't go into a huge amount of detail, but it does provide you with it's a good starting point. Guide to Social Security Law, that is much more detailed, more intricate, looking at the nuts and bolts. It's the it's the formal official interpretation of the Social Security legislation, and then the last link there for the diehards, if you really want to go out and have a look at the actual
people who really want to read legislation. Yeah, that's right.
Then that's that there.
Well, certainly if people make appeals and they're on very technical ground, they may want to look at the legislation, so or have someone help them look at it. So it is a good link to use, particularly if you're going to make an appeal against the decision. So it is great to have that link. So thank you for that, Andrew.
No problem. And so that's the last slide, I believe. Mark, is that correct?
It is, yeah. So are there any quick questions before we... I'm happy to hang around if there are questions, and if you've got any, you can put them up now, and we'll certainly try and work through them. But I would like to say that we get funding for these webinars from the John T. Reid Charitable Trust. So I'd like to say thank you to them for that money. But also to you, Andrew, thank you so much for sharing your extensive technical knowledge on this area. It's I think there's a couple of really good tips in there for people, and things that people might have missed, or there's funny little rules and that sort of thing. So we'll be putting this recording of the webinar up on our website within the next couple of days, and all the slides will be there too. So there's no other questions coming through, so just up to me to just thank people for coming along, and I hope it's been useful. Andrew's agreed to do a few more of these for us, so we're going to do, and we'll negotiate some dates with him around parents and families, carers, disability and students. So you'll see those popping into our website under education in the next little while. So let's maybe close it there. Thank you again, Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew.
No worries, Mark and Gail. I hope it's a useful resource for everyone out there in the CF community. And look, if it provides any help or assistance or provides new information that you weren't aware of, then that's great. And yeah, and as Mark said, if I didn't cover, say, circumstances that were more specific to you tonight, that's okay. There will be other webinars based on other areas of income support in the near future and ongoing. So you can always hang out for those.
Sure. Look, there's a few comments here, Andrew, just to let you know people are finding the stuff interesting. There's a few people saying they've got things they can look up tomorrow. Melissa's just asking in our future one, can we do something when we do parents on newly diagnosed children? So that's always a big area for us. We tend to get, newly diagnosed babies 2 or 3 a month, so they sort of trickle through.
What sort of assistance?
Yeah, what sort of assistance? So Melissa, we'll put that on the agenda and make sure we focus on that a little bit.
Certainly, that's not a problem. I'll just quickly say to Melissa, if you're expecting, regardless or not of whether you know that your child will be born with CF, and you're expecting to be eligible for one of the parenting payments, maybe it's parenting payment single, or things like paid parental leave, you can look to apply in advance of that expected date of birth. I know that's certainly the case with things like paid parental leave.
I think she already has the child, Andrew. So this is after the fact.
My apologies. All right,
that's okay.
That's not that's not a problem. We can certainly add that information in for you, Melissa, next time round.
Great.
Great.
All right, we'll draw it to a close. I'm sorry we've run over time, but it's such a big area, and I was really keen to certainly get through all of that. So thank you again, Andrew, and we'll...
Thanks, Andrew, for the really comprehensive information too. I learnt a lot.
Yeah, it's been good for us. I'll talk to you in the background, Andrew, so talk to you again shortly.
No worries. My pleasure. Have a good night, everyone.
Okay, thanks very much.